Hi, my name is Satish, and this is my first ever YouTube video. And I hope you guys like it, and there are many more videos to come from me. The purpose of me starting this YouTube channel is to create awareness, create a lot of content which is educational and unbiased for a lot of people. And I really hope to explore more scientific, environmental and political and socio-political topics that are happening in our day-to-day lives. And the aim of my videos are to explain these topics in a very simplistic manner, bring out the facts, and hopefully clear all the misinformation out there in our day-to-day news. So today I'm going to be talking about electric vehicles versus gasoline engines. And this is just from an emission standpoint. So we have seen a lot of articles out there, about cost and expenses of maintaining an electric vehicle, the first cost, the operational cost, the time to go charge it, and a lot of hassles associated with it. And there are a lot of obstacles that a first-time EV buyer faces, but not a lot of people think from an environmental standpoint whether it really makes sense, whether they are passionate enough that they are contributing to reduce the carbon footprint, and whether they are involved in tackling everyday issues like global warming and climate change. But how does an electric vehicle contribute to that? And that's what I am going to look at today. So I'm taking up three aspects to look at from an environmental point of view for an EV. One is the battery mining and production itself. The second thing is the fuel cycle. And the third one is basically the tailpipe emissions. So these three are the important from start of life cycle to end of the life cycle for an EV vehicle. And it's important that we look at each one of these aspects and compare gasoline versus electric vehicles. So when we are talking about battery mining, we are obviously talking about the raw materials that make the electric car. And we know that there is a big battery pack underneath the car. And those are made of rare earth elements like cobalt, nickel, graphite, those kind of materials. So one of the important things to know is that those metals are very rare. They occur only in a few places under the earth, and it takes a lot of energy and emissions to mine those materials. It takes a lot of sophisticated machines, just like how we all got used to fracking, and it was so much of a challenge to drill oil before they came up with fracking. The same thing with respect to mining as well. And the other thing is that obviously if you are concerned from a safety standpoint, if you're comparing it with coal mining, it's very similar in that a lot of workers put themselves at risk to go into these deep mines to dig for these rare earth metals. They sometimes use hand tools, they sometimes use sophisticated equipment, mining machinery as well. But the point I'm trying to make is that not from an ethical standpoint, but from an emission standpoint, EVs do generate a lot of emissions in the upstream portion of battery mining. So next we are going to focus on the battery production itself, and keep in mind when the battery, when they have finished the mining, now the battery production has to start once they get all the rare earth materials in place, and the battery production facility consumes a lot of electricity, and about 50% of the total life cycle emissions of a battery comes from the electricity that it consumes in making the battery process itself. And this is where I think EVs again lose out to gasoline engines, is because you don't know what kind of electricity comes in to produce the battery. So that depends on the location. So if you are very conservative in your estimate of emissions, you can say that, the battery factory is located in Asia, where a lot of electricity grid is still coal, and so a lot more emissions take to make that electricity, which becomes available for the battery production itself. But the reality is that Tesla and other companies are opening up battery production facilities here in the US, where the grid mix is different. So in Nevada, where they have the gigawatt plant, the electricity mix is more natural gas. They have completely moved away from coal, so that actually helps in the emissions. But still, net emissions are still a lot higher for EV when it comes to battery mining and battery production. Next, we are going to talk about the fuel cycle. Fuel cycle pretty much indicates where the fuel comes from for a gasoline versus an electric vehicle. Now, for a gasoline, obviously it's a hydrocarbon, so it needs to be fracked or drilled from under the earth, and then it needs to be transported, stored in pipelines, and it has to be delivered all the way to a gasoline pump. But for an EV, it's just electricity, because you go to a charging station, you drive up, and you plug in your electric adapter into your car. So basically, you're using the electrons from the grid. Now, it depends on where you're using it again, where those electrons comes from. So is it driven by wind or solar, or is it still coming from natural gas or coal? So if you are in the, let's say, Netherlands or Europe, where they have a lot of renewable grid, then you can feel good about your emissions from a Tesla when you're charging, because all those electrons are renewably driven. But if you are looking at the US itself, the mix is different, the emissions profile looks different, and you still need to be aware of the emissions when it comes to charging your vehicle. So comparatively, if you look at gasoline versus your EV, I would say they are pretty much the same when it comes to fuel cycle. But wait for the clinching factor for the Tesla when we're talking about emissions while operating. So after you have loaded up, you have charged up your Tesla or your gasoline car, now it's time to drive. And you have to look at your lifetime of emissions when you're on the road. And this is where Tesla actually wins big over gasoline cars, is because there's no tailpipe emissions. But compared to IC engines or gasoline cars, where they burn a lot of fuel and waste a lot of energy that comes out of their tailpipe. Only 20% of their energy goes in providing the forward motion for the vehicle, but the rest is all goes up in the air as emission, as NOx and SOx and CO2. So that's where Tesla wins in terms of net emissions compared to a gasoline car. So thank you for listening to me patiently, guys. I hope this video was useful for you. And I hope that you guys can make a conversation when next time someone comes to you and says that, why are EVs better than gasoline engines in terms of emissions. I hope you have an answer now. There are a lot more resources out there on the internet and online, and I'll also put in some resources in my link below. So hopefully those resources can be helpful as well for you to make a good conversation with anyone who's looking to purchase an EV. Thanks so much.